The history of Rome is full of fascinating debates about different aspects or events in the history of its civilization. Many of these debates may never be answered, but I also believe that there are others to which we can arrive at a correct and acceptable response. And today, it's one of those debates that I think can be answered, which we're going to cover in this video. With the debate being about how, in my opinion, people should actually call the Byzantine Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire, and spoilers about my opinion, both terms are incorrect. For some mysterious reason that only the internet knows, for years now, one of the debates, perhaps the most virulent and common debate in the Romaboo community, has been the debate over whether the Byzantine Empire was Byzantine or Roman, and in any case, what would be the most correct term to refer to that remnant of what was once the true OG Roman Empire? For years, it has been one of the topics I have been most passionate about trying to answer, and a topic that has often made me think so much that I couldn't even sleep properly at night. And it would be during those complicated nights when I was still trying to find a correct answer to that question that I would have undoubtedly needed the Manta sleep masks, the sponsor of today's video. Manta Sleep offers the best sleep masks on the market by far, being extremely lightweight and comfortable for optimal rest, a sleep mask that feels like it was custom forged for your face-eye cups, straps, and even tension, all infinitely adjustable so it fits perfectly, like it was made for you. It delivers true 100% blackout, even in broad daylight, so that your REM sleep isn't interrupted by a single glimmer without pressing a finger on your eyelids or lashes, which is actually something I've always struggled to find on the market. But Manta Sleep does it brilliantly, and for anyone who sleeps on their side, and let's be honest, that's most of us, and probably also the Byzantines or Eastern Romans, the Pro version is engineered with C-shaped cups and an air bubble seal that disappear into your pillow, yet still lock out all light, and thanks to that, even as you turn, it will stay in place easily. All of this is wrapped in premium, breathable fabric, modal foam cups, ventilated materials that keep your face cool and are soft enough that you forget you're wearing it. So while you're suffering from headaches thinking about the Byzantine or Eastern Roman debate, you can get a Manta sleep mask to help you sleep better and reflect on it. If you want to nurture your own strategic brilliance, whether you're writing, gaming, or just trying to resolve the debate of whether Eastern Rome should be called like that or called Byzantium, check out the link below to get your own Manta sleep mask and support the channel. Thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video, and now back to our spicy debate about the lasting eastern half of the Roman Empire. So before answering that question directly, we need to go back further to gain a clearer understanding and perspective of my reasoning. Long before Roman domination, although in a more indirect and subtle way, Greek culture had already influenced much of the Eastern Mediterranean, and even beyond. This cultural, philosophical, religious, and even linguistic influence began gradually during early antiquity and reached its absolute peak with the conquests of Alexander the Great and the creation of his gigantic empire. And even after the fragmentation of his empire, the Hellenic influence had been extended to the farthest corners of their original homeland, with even small pieces of Indian kingdoms like the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, with its elites speaking Greek for centuries, and even with many descendants from there being Greeks, so much so that until this day, there are still traces of populations ethnically distinct from the rest of that region, a clear example of the Hellenic heritage that flows through the veins of those groups even after more than 2,000 years. And even after the Roman occupation, most of the territories formerly conquered by Alexander the Great continued to maintain that Hellenistic influence. Even the Parthians, having replaced the previous Persian administration with the Seleucid Greek elites, continued to use Greek as their language of administration and diplomacy, remaining a prestigious and highly respected language among the intellectuals of the time, with Greek influence no longer having anything to prove for its importance and unmatched legacy even already by then. While, for example, in Egypt, the Greek influence remained even more present among the local population and the descendants of Greek settlers from the time of Alexander the Great, so much so that for centuries, and in fact until the conquest of the Arabs, the majority of the population living in the cities of Egypt such as Alexandria or Cairo spoke Greek, with Egyptian being a practically forgotten language by the 5th century, which would only be rediscovered more than a millennium later thanks to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone by Napoleon's expedition to Egypt. While in Anatolia and mainland Greece, the Greek language was the official and most spoken language of the area by the entire population, practically until the fall of Constantinople, with even the arrival of the Turks in Anatolia not having stopped the Hellenic influence in that area for a long time, nor its language. And in fact, the Hellenic influence was so strong and present even after the fall of Constantinople that until the last century, during the Greco-Turkish War, when the Greeks tried to realize their megali idea to revive the Byzantine Empire, that only then the Hellenic influence in Anatolia ended definitively after the genocides carried out by the Turks and the massive deportation of Greeks back to mainland Greece in the territories that make up the country that is today modern Greece. All this historical summary of the Hellenistic influence was only to remind all of you how truly influential and present the Greek culture and its language have been in all corners of the most powerful civilizations of antiquity, and that its influence lasted for more than 2 millennia in territories that extended far beyond the Aegean Sea. All of this to return to our main topic, the relationship of that region with the concept of being or not being Roman. To begin with, it must be clarified that yes, although the Romans conquered the Greeks politically and militarily, the Greeks conquered the Romans culturally. That is undeniable, given how much that civilization profoundly influenced the Romans in their early days. And although the elites and people who could afford an education all spoke Greek, even preferring to speak that language over Latin, it never took away from the fact that except for some remnant cities of the old Greek colonies centuries ago, in the West, they were always Latins culturally, before Hellenistic, with the majority of the population in places like Gaul, Hispania, and Carthage speaking Latin, with aesthetics, religion, and culture being more Latin than Hellenistic, with both halves always having had a clear difference between the two. And in fact, the differences go back long before Diocletian's Tetrarchic reform. A great example of this was the division of the territories of the Roman Republic, after Octavian and Mark Antony had ended their alliance, and begun the last phase of the civil wars of the Republic that ended with the victory of Octavian becoming Augustus, the first emperor of the now Roman Empire. It is fascinating to see that even in those early stages, the natural division for managing those territories was a division similar to the one we would later experience when the two halves would finally separate. But moving forward, precisely to that definitive split in 395, by that point, the Greeks had been under Roman political, military, and cultural control for centuries, clearly having marked the Hellenistic minds deeply, while at the same time having fully adopted the Roman identity on par with their previously Hellenistic identity. Although all the inhabitants of the East considered themselves Greeks, none would be offended if called Romans by that point, being a term of identification that they would adopt with pride and strength, especially after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, considering themselves the last and truly legitimate ones to deserve to be called Romans. So, at that point in history when the empire split in two, yes, I personally believe that calling it the Eastern Roman Empire is entirely accurate, and the only term that should be used to refer to that half of the empire. But after that, that's where things get tricky. You see, my reasoning is the following one. The reason why we call the Eastern Roman Empire is because it's the part of the Roman Empire that's in the East, right? But that implies that there is a Western Roman Empire because for the East to exist, the West must exist too, right? So by the time the Western Roman Empire ceased to exist in 476 with the deposition of the last Western emperor, continuing to talk about the Eastern Roman Empire doesn't make much sense when you think about it, since the Western Roman Empire no longer exists. And by that point, the newly settled Germans in the former Western Roman territories, none of them denied that the Greeks from the East were the legitimate Romans, with absolutely all historians, intellectuals, religious figures, and records of the time referring to them as the Romans, and not as they would later be referred to in a derogatory manner as the Greeks, especially after the coronation of Charlemagne. Therefore, by that point, after 476, it no longer made sense to continue speaking of the Eastern Roman Empire, the more appropriate term being the Roman Empire, straight and simple, just that, the good old only single Roman Empire, since they were the only ones being an empire that was Roman at the time. So that's it, right? We should simply call them the Eastern Roman Empire before 476, and after that, just call them the Roman Empire, right? Well, no, and here comes the part that is even trickier than before. We have already clarified previously that the eastern part of the empire always maintained a clear distinction with the West by maintaining its Hellenic culture and influence, not to mention that the most spoken language was Greek, and that was by far. But at the same time, politically and administratively, it remained a completely Romanized entity from centuries of Roman control, Romans who came from Italy, originally from the Latin tribe. And the term Roman is also synonymous with romance, romance being synonymous with Latin in the linguistic sense of the word, which does not correspond to an appropriate description of the Romans of the East. And the proof of this is that, after more than a century and a half of the fall of the West, finally, the Emperor Heraclius decided to confirm and reaffirm the Hellenistic identity in the empire by making the Greek language official as the official administrative and political language of the empire in 620 CE. And we all agree that whether it's a country, a kingdom, or an empire, they are all first and foremost political entities, right? So wouldn't it be precise to represent in its name the official language of that country, kingdom, or empire? And it is here that we finally come close to my definitive answer, and that is that the correct term for this point on about how we should call that empire would not be the Eastern Roman Empire, nor simply the Roman Empire, and even less the Byzantine Empire, which is a term that was invented later by the Germans, long after the fall of Constantinople to the Ottomans, but rather its most correct name that should be used would be one that reflects the linguistic and cultural identity that they represented at that time, that is, the Hellenistic Empire, or even the Hellenistic Roman Empire. Those two are actually the two most appropriate terms to use after the reign of Heraclius. And I say both, even the one putting the word Roman, as in the Hellenistic Roman Empire, because in addition to the political and linguistic identity of that empire, there is also the Roman symbolism, heritage, and legitimacy, with its influence being present in the subconscious of its population until the very end of the fall of its capital, Constantinople, even if by that point absolutely no one in Constantinople, or among the Greeks controlled by the Ottomans, spoke Latin. And there you have it. Those would be, in my opinion, the only two ways that the empire after Heraclius should be called the Hellenistic Empire or the Hellenistic Roman Empire. So, to conclude and summarize my entire reasoning, while both the West and the East coexisted after their final separation in 395, the most appropriate term would be the Eastern Roman Empire. Later, after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the proper term would be solely and simply the Roman Empire. And after Heraclius's reform in 620, the only term or the only two correct terms to use would be, if we take a purely pragmatic and logical attitude without emotions or pre-established ideas, the Hellenistic Empire or the Hellenistic Roman Empire. That's my opinion, and now you know that whenever I write an alternate scenario related to the eastern part of Rome, in my mind, I always call them the Hellenistic Roman Empire. And although I consider that those should be the only acceptable terms, and if it were just for me, I would call them that in all my videos, personally, I will continue to say Eastern Roman Empire, or even on rare occasions, Byzantine Empire, simply for the fact of not wanting to confuse my old audience, let alone my new and future audience watching my videos by not understanding what the hell am I referring to with the Hellenistic Roman Empire, because I do not have the arrogance or the delusion to think of myself as important or influential enough to create a new trend of how to call the Eastern Roman Empire, at least not for now while being such a small channel. But who knows, maybe one day, that term will gain strength and recognition among the Romaboos until eventually everyone starts using those terms, at least as synonyms with the others, but ideally, and what would be my greatest dream, being used to replace and eliminate once and for all the derogatory and insulting term that is the Byzantine Empire. But all of that, of course, is just my opinion. Thank you for watching the video until the end, and I hope you enjoyed my analysis of what we should or shouldn't call the Eastern Roman Empire. And I hope you liked this video format, which is different from the usual alternate scenario videos I do. Don't hesitate to tell me in the comments if you'd like more videos like this from time to time on the channel. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, become a member of the channel in order to have early access to new videos, and comment on what you thought of it. Thank you to our newest member of the channel, Titus Kaiser Vespasianus. Shout out to you, and I deeply appreciate your support of my work and projects to come. And without anything else to say, see you next time.